And good afternoon while waiting for your classmates. This is your session one, no? Ay, sorry. And tomorrow you have a scheduled quiz at 8 a.m. And the coverage is 36.1, but today we'll be discussing two. Sorry. Today we'll be discussing 36.2, and then for our flip session on Thursday, we'll be having the last activity for 36.1. Baka malito tayo. We're having this kasi para pare-parehas yung dinidiscuss natin um, sa sync session, no? So, mauuna na tayong magsimula ng 36.2, pero bukas pa yung quiz nyo ng 36.1, and you still have a pending activity for 36.1, which will be on Thursday. The one that is posted already is worksheet 5. If you would notice, worksheet 5 naka-post na. That's due on Saturday, and that's the first activity for 36.2. Worksheet 4, kung napansin nyo, wala pa. Kasi yun yung gagawin nyo sa Thursday. Ayan. Nakita ko merong mga nagpe-present dito sa... nandito ako. Andiyan na pala. Akala ko naligaw kayo sa group chat or what. Sige po, I think we should start kasi we are 5 minutes late na. Medyo mahaba tong discussion natin ngayon ng konti kasi we have several activities. You are now seeing a Violet presentation. Tama ba ang na-share ko? Dali lang.
Opo.
Ayan. So, ganun ulit, no? If you are hearing unnecessary noise aside from the noise na gagawin na maririnig nyo from our neighborhood dog mamaya. Like, pag may mga buzzing and so on na hindi masyadong maganda sa pandinig, just let me know. For today, we'll be starting with 36.2. So last week, 2 weeks tayong nag 36.1. Again, this has nothing to do with the numbers we are using. Ano lang to, code to ng DepEd. No? So 36.2, the objective is very simple. We just need to describe the different types of plate boundaries. So we are plate boundaries are not new to us, no? Kasi last week we've talked about plate boundaries and how and where are this on the map, no? Plate boundary map of the plates. Okay, and nakita nyo na rin yung map, nakita nyo na rin yung mga black lines dun sa map na medyo highlighted kasi sila yung plate boundaries. Ayan, for session 1, supposed to be kung kung face-to-face na sa session 1 pa lang tayo, inayos ko na. So, before we start, we should be able to know the following terms. This is a review from last week's session. So week 1, we have lithosphere, asthenosphere, crust, continental crust, oceanic crust. Ito yung mga pinag-aralan natin sa week 1. Week 2, we have earthquake, epicenter, seismograph, seismic waves, and hypocenter. So, kung titignan ko siya on my point of view, siguro meron na kayong mga idea about this kasi we performed several activities about this. Medyo napilitan na kayong magbasa ng mga modules nyo, and mapipilitan ulit kayo magbasa in the near future. Anyway, if you don't have the access to the complete module set of the Science 10, no, tomorrow I think you'll have your parents will be getting your laptops tomorrow, and your laptops has been loaded with all the materials from the division office, so you can just browse the materials that you need. Kung mapapansin nyo rin, I'm not requiring you to answer and submit everything na nasa SLEM. Ayan. Kasi this is for your self-learning. This is a self-learning module. Supposed to be, ano nyo na to, responsibility nyo na yung magbasa from here kasi pwede akong kumuha ng exam dito, pwede akong kumuha ng examples dito, pwede akong kumuha ng quizzes dito. So it's your responsibility to read if may mga hindi pa kayo naiintindihan sa mga synchronous lessons. Ayan. So I have here a big picture and then nakalagay sa taas ay review. Okay. So on the picture, I hope you're seeing this well, are different labeled parts of the lithosphere. No? You have here continental rift zone here. Mamaya ititignan natin kung para saan ang mga continental rift zones or paano sila na-form. You have here volcanic arc. Ayan. You have here a trench and it's labeled as convergent plate boundary. You have here subducting plate. So in this picture, ang dami-daming nangyayari, no? Hindi mo alam kung saan ka mag-focus. Kasi sobrang daming nangyayari. This is a summary of the plate tectonics theory. So yung plate tectonics theory na yun can be summarized into a picture, and if we would summarize plate tectonics theory into a picture, ito siya. You have here divergent boundary, oceanic ridge, nakalagay, spreading ridge, a transform boundary here, lithosphere, mantle. Here we have convergent boundary again, and the volcanic arc. Sa kabilang side, nakita nyo volcanic arc. Dito, volcanic island arc naman yung nasa kabila. And I think next week, yung deeper explanation about the difference between a volcanic arc and volcanic island arc, trenches, subduction zones, and so on. Ayan, as a review, which of the plates is mostly oceanic crust? Sige, gamitin natin yung mga features ng Google Meet like your microphone, your chat box. Ayan. Which of the plates is mostly oceanic crust? Pag ganito yung tanong, isa lang yung unang dumadating sa isip natin. That's Pacific plate, no? Mostly oceanic crust yung buong Pacific plate. While there are lots of plates which are combinations of oceanic and continental crust, like the Eurasian plate, African plate, South American plate, combination. Karamihan combination, no? 90% of the plates are combination. This one, why do you think the plates are divided in such a way that some continents and oceans are merged in one large unit? We'll be answering that soon. And the last question, what lies between two plates? Our answer is plate boundaries. So on your worksheet 5, if you have browsed your worksheet 5, meron doong activity wherein nakalagay kung ano yung dalawang adjacent plate, and then you have to identify what type of plate boundary is present between that. Kasi plate boundary is characterized by the adjacent movement of the plates. No? We have 3 types of plate boundaries, but we will be identifying them according to what's happening on that plate boundary. For example, if the adjacent plates or yung plate na magkatabi are moving away from each other, there's a specific name for that plate boundary. If the two plates, if the adjacent plates are moving towards each other, there's also a specific name for that. And also, if they are sliding past each other, another specific name for that plate boundary. Again, a plate boundary is named after or because of the motion that's taking place on that particular region or that particular area. Whether the plates are moving towards each other on that region, or the plates are moving away from each other on that region, or just sliding past each other. Tell me if masyado mabilis ang discussion ko or masyado ako mabilis magsalita. Pumara kayo. What are the consequences of Earth having been divided into tectonic plates or the Earth's crust? That's a typo, siguro Earth's crust. Mamaya, pagkatapos ng discussion, makikita natin lahat yan, iisa-isahin natin kung ano-ano yung mga implication, consequences of Earth's having been divided into several tectonic plates. But before that, you can use your chat box. I'll be posting the PowerPoint presentation later after this call, right after this call, para hindi nyo na kailangang mag-take down notes ng mag-take down notes. If you're comfortable with it, okay lang. So, in here we are going to identify the plate boundary associated with each of the major lithospheric plates. But I have here a small or a little activity. Nakita nyo na to dati, no? Itong picture na to. Medyo, yung iba sa inyo, familiar na sa kulay. Yung iba naman sa inyo, na-memorize na to. Yung iba sa inyo, napapanaginipan na to. Yung iba naman, pag nakita nyo na yung shape ng continents, nai-imagine nyo na rin kung nasaan yung mga plate boundaries. Well, that's good. Today, I'll be showing you parts of this map, and then we will try to identify what plates are adjacent to each other, no? Kung ano-ano yung mga plates na yan na magkatabi na yun. Please use the chat box. Bilisan lang natin to. Let's identify the boundaries. This is boundary between sorry. Or kung tinatamad kayo mag-chat, you can always use the microphone.
Eurasian and North American po.
This is boundary between?
Eurasian and North American.
Yan, very good. This is between Eurasian and North American. What you're seeing here is Iceland, no? And then this one is Greenland. And then kung naaalala nyo, itong green na to, tsaka yung orange na to, mamaya ipapakita natin yung mas malaking picture na. Next. This is boundary between what plates? Anong plate kaya itong mga to? You can use the chat box. Yes po.
Yung guess ko lang po, yung red po ay yung Nubian or African plate po. Tapos yung violet po ay yung South American plate po.
Yes po, very good. So, South American yung violet and the African or Nubian yung pink. So, this is the boundary between African and South American plates. Siguro na-visualize nyo na sila or siguro pag nakita nyo na yung shape, parang kilala ko tong shape na to or what. This one. Boundary between, I think dito yan, ito, tsaka ito. May mga sumasagot sa chat box.
Miss?
Yes po. Sige lang po.
Miss, nasagot mo.
Nasa chat box ba? Okay, ayan. Pacific and North American. Next. Favorite ko tong boundary na to eh. Itong area na to dito eh.
Australia.
Sige po.
Yes, pwede po sumagot.
Pwede naman.
Australian po and Eurasia
Ayan.
plate.
So, Eurasian and Indo-Australian plate. Or, you can have Australian plate as a whole. Meron kasi tayong makikitang mga maps na bakit biglang naghiwalay na yung Indian tsaka Australian plate. Merong mga ganun tectonic plate maps na nakahiwalay na yung Indian. They are classifying Indian as a minor plate na. Kasi meron nga namang break between Australian and Indian plate. Malapit na silang maghiwalay. And I think this is the last one. Oh no, this is not yet the last one. Ito medyo obvious na tong green ito.
Miss Nazca and Pacific plate
Ayan,
po.
yes po. This is Pacific and Nazca plate. Boundary between Pacific and Nazca plate. And another one.
Miss, Juan de Fuca Plate and North American Plate po. Joke.
Sige. Nazca and, ito, may sumagot.
Nazca at saka ano po, South American Plate.
Yan, Nazca and South American Plate. Sumagot na dito sa, may mga sumasagot din sa chat box. Okay lang din. Last one. It's very, very easy.
Philippine to
Para siyang pamigay sa quiz na. So, this is Philippine and Pacific Plate. Ayan. So, dito sila. Yung mga yan. Kinuha ko sa mga part na yan. So, these particular areas are all plate boundaries. No? Kasi they are boundary between two or more adjacent plates. And on that particular plate boundaries, may mga nangyayaring motion. Either they are moving away from each other, like this one, like the very first one, this moving away from each other. And also this one, the Nubian and South American plate, they are moving away from each other. Also this, Nazca and Pacific plate, they are moving away from each other. There are also plates that are moving towards each other, like this, the Indo-Australian plate and the Eurasian plate. And this, the South American plate and the Nazca plate. Also, the Philippine Sea plate and Pacific plate. Some plates are moving, slide past each other, just like most of the boundaries in here. Yung mga nandito sa may part ng Pacific and North American plate. Sa side na to, usually they are sliding past each other. Okay. So, with that, we'll be introducing the three types of plate boundaries. Namely, convergent, divergent, and transform. Kung i-analyze natin yung mga nasa picture, looking at the arrows, the direction of the arrowheads, no, madali na nating ma-identify if which plates are moving away from each other, towards each other, and are sliding past each other. So when you say convergent, from the word converge, they are moving towards each other. Ito yung example natin, magkaharap yung arrow, so they are moving towards each other, or they are converging, or they are bumping into each other, nagsasama sila. So divergent naman, they are moving away from each other, naghihiwalay. Okay? Or moving, moving away from each other. Is there a better term for that? Naghihiwalay? Wala naman siguro. And transform, they are sliding past each other. So, madali silang tandaan or madali silang maalala kapag naaalala mo yung direction ng arrowheads kapag pag nababanggit yung word. O kaya yung iba sa inyo gumagamit ng mga mnemonics, like for example, diverge. Diverge meaning hiwalay or what. So, for us to better understand that, we have here GIFs, no? Kung paano sila nag-move. And a little explanation about their relative motion. Again, it's relative motion because it's not the plate boundary which is moving, rather it's the plates that are either meeting or ano ba yung kabaliktaran nun. Either meeting or going on their ways, no? Naghihiwalay sa particular boundary. Again, baka isipin natin, yung convergent boundary yung convergent boundary, ang movement niya ay nagjo-join or nagsasama or ang movement ng boundary ay nagjo-join. So, hindi si boundary yung may movement, kaya lang, yung description ng plate boundary ay nababase sa movement ng mga plates na adjacent. For example, sa divergent boundary, yung gitna ng Atlantic Ocean, kung naaalala nyo, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, we call that Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and ridges are known to be divergent boundaries. Pag narinig niyo yung ridge, ibig sabihin, it's associated with divergent boundary. Ridge, naghihiwalay. Kung naaalala nyo, naghihiwalay yung part na African and South American plate. Ibig sabihin, ang plate boundary between them is a divergent boundary because of the motion of the plates which are moving away from each other. So for divergent boundary, letter A, plates are moving apart. That's the simplest information, or that's the simplest description we can get. And because of that, plates are moving apart. New crusts are created. Nakakabuo ng bagong crust. Okay? That's the thing we use to describe, or I mean, di ba last time you were asked kung which of the following, or kung um which of the two types of crust is younger, and you answered oceanic, because sa divergent plate boundaries, especially sa mga ridges, new crusts are created. Because when there's a gap between the two boundaries, magma is coming out of the surface, and then na-form yung bagong crust. Ayan. For convergent boundary naman, plates are coming together or they are bumping into each other. There are several types of convergent plate boundaries. No, there are 3 types of convergent plate boundary. It depends on what type of crust are bumping into each other. For example, if oceanic crust and continental crust are bumping into each other in a convergent boundary, we call that oceanic continental convergence. So madali lang siyang tandaan. If dalawa namang oceanic crust yung nagbabanggaan, we can simply call that oceanic convergence. And if dalawa namang continental crust, we can call that continental convergence. Narinig niyo ba itong parang hissing sound? Is this coming from my device? Okay lang yung audio niyo? Check naman.
Which naririnig po konti po.
I think this is from my device. Ayan. Hindi ko mahanap yung isa kong headphones. Ayan, parang wala na siya. Okay, another one. Ito naman yung mga landforms associated with the types of boundaries that we've discussed, no? But in here, dadaanan lang natin konti kasi pag-aaralan pa natin siya next week sa processes along plate boundaries, no, sa 36.3. Gaya ng sabi ko kanina, when a divergent happens on ocean floor, we call that a ridge. Ito. But when a divergent plate boundary happens to appear on a continental crust, we call that a rift valley. This is specifically happening somewhere in Iceland. Tama na. Somewhere in Iceland. Nakita nyo kanina sa first picture na hinulaan nyo, yung divergent boundary ay dinaanan niya yung Iceland. So, dun sa Iceland, maraming mga ganito, rift valley. Kasi naghihiwalay nga yung plate. Yung mga convergent boundary naman, kapag dalawang continental plate yung nagbanggaan, ang na-form ay mountain ranges. Kapag naman may oceanic plate na involved, laging merong subduction. Pero kung dalawang continental plate yung nagbabanggaan, walang subduction yan. And then for transform, plates are moving against each other and then stress is building up. When stress is released, the result is an earthquake. I think I have interactives here again. Tignan natin ito saglit. This one, ganun din. Merong mga examples. Basahin nyo to kapag sinend ko yung PowerPoint presentation. Mabilisan lang, convergent boundary occurs when two plates are pushing towards each other. Examples of convergent boundary, ayan, between Eurasian and Indian plate at the Himalayas. And the boundary between Nazca plate and South American plate along the west coast of South America. Tignan natin yun mamaya. Divergent boundary marks when two plates are moving apart from each other. Examples are the boundary between the African plate and Arabian plate in the Red Sea, the boundary between Pacific and Antarctic, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Those are examples. Sabi dito, boundary made up the boundary between the North American and Eurasian plate in the North Atlantic, crossing Iceland, and the South American and the African plates in the South Atlantic. And also this one. The boundary for transform, boundary occurs when two plates slide past each other. And ayan yung relative motion nila. Balik tayo dun sa presentation natin. Another interactive. Tignan ko nga kung maayos ko. This one is better. Para tong yung ginawa natin last week, but this time I'll be showing fault zones, subduction zones, and major earthquakes, vent fields, plate movements. We'll start with the plates. Yung sinasabi ko sa inyo na naghiwalay sa map na to, magkahiwalay na si Australian tsaka si Indian. Maybe na ano na nila, I mean, nakita na nila na medyo maraming fault lines na maghihiwalay kay Australian tsaka kay Indian. Plate boundaries, ayan. Plate movement. We'll be discussing plate movement later on, pero baka mamaya iniisip nyo, ano ba to si Miss? Wala naman kami nakikitang gumagalaw. So, walang gumagalaw dito sa presentation na to. Instead, may mga nakalagay na arrows. And as you can see, the arrows has been representing the movement of the plates. Kung mapapansin nyo, may mga napakahahabang arrow, just like the Pacific. Ibig sabihin, the Pacific plate is moving faster than any other plates with the shorter arrows. Like, ito sa Mid-Atlantic Ridge, sa boundary between South America and Africa, maiikli lang yung arrow. Ibig sabihin, mabagal yung movement dyan sa part na yan. Pero sa Pacific, medyo malaki yung, mahaba yung arrow. Ibig sabihin, si Pacific, tulak na tulak kay, kay Philippine Sea Plate, papuntang Eurasian Plate. Australian din. Nakikita niyo ba yung stress na nararamdaman ng Philippine Sea Plate sa mga panahong to? Nakikita niyo ba yung mahahabang linya na yan? Also, tanggalin ko yung plate movements para mas makita natin yung vent fields. This means volcanoes and underwater volcanoes. Kaya vent field na yung nilagay niya. Kasi when we plotted the volcanoes, active volcanoes, usually nasa mga land area lang yun, no? Pero this one, kasama na yung mga vent fields even on the Atlantic Ocean. Ayan, yung Pilipinas halos natakpan na nga ata. Major earthquakes, nakita natin to dati. Tanggalin ko yan. Papakita natin yung fault zones. Ayan. And the subduction zone. Okay. So, usually, yung fault zones and subduction zones are also associated with plate movements. Hindi nga lang sila kasing lalalim o kasing defined ng mga plate boundaries. Ibig sabihin, fault zones are a result of movement of the plates. Mga break on the on the lithosphere na hindi naman makaklasify as plate boundaries. Balik tayo dito sa ating interactive. Ayan. Nasa na pa ako? Send ko ulit ito mamaya para ma-explore nyo. And gaya ng nasabi ko kanina, the specific plate boundaries here are classified as either divergent, convergent, or transform depending on the relative movement of the plates. For example, here, a classic example is the plate boundary between South American and Nazca plate. This is convergent plate boundary because Nazca is pushing towards South American plate and South American plate is moving towards Nazca plate. Kaso nga lang, mabagal siyang mag-move papunta kay Nazca plate. Sino yung mabibilis? Ito, si Pacific plate. Mabilis na mag-move papunta doon. Gusto niya nang itulak yung Philippine Sea plate. Feeling ko after several hundred years, ay mas mababreak pa ang Philippine plate into several pieces. Kasi mabilis yung movement ni Pacific plate papunta doon, causing a great stress here. Class, kaya yung Marianas Trench nandito. Diba? The deepest portion of the Earth's lithosphere is the Marianas Trench. You know that from grade 5, no? Marianas Trench is here. Marianas Trench is a consequence of Pacific Plate pushing the Philippine Sea Plate. Diyan. Dito naman, nandito si Mount Everest. Siya naman yung pinakamataas na mountain, pinakamataas na landform sa Earth. And that's because of the Australian plate pushing the Eurasian plate. And they are both, they are meeting at both continental crust. That's why medyo hindi makapagsabdak, pataas yung nangyayari. And yes, the Himalayas are still growing. Bakit may isa pa akong interactive dito? Check ko lang kung ito ba ay... maganda pala to. I'll be showing you the relative motions of plates and the reactions of the adjacent plates. So, unahin natin to. Ito kung nakikita nyo tong arrow na to. Wait lang. Anong nangyayari? Ayaw niya. Ba't ayaw niyang gumalaw? Napagalaw namin to. Ayan, okay na. Ayan, sana nakikita nyo to. Hindi ba?
Miss, wala pong nakapresent.
Walang nakapresent. Sorry. Nasa na ba? Nawawala. Chrome tab. Mountain maker. Shaker. Ayan. Nakikita na ba to? Yan. I'm showing the transform plate boundary, and when I move it here, ito yung result niya. Magkakaroon lang ng displacement. Kaya siya, ang tawag sa kanya ay conservative boundary. Other term for transform boundary is conservative boundary if you're reading the things here sa baba. It's because no new crust is created, wala din namang nade-destroy. Move lang siya. Next, this one. Ayan. This is a continental plate boundary. As a result of two continental plate boundaries bumping into each other, nagkakaroon ng mountain ranges or mountainous area. Ayan. Okay. The Himalayas, the highest mountain in the world, are still being created this way. Next, this one here has a subduction zone, and I think magkakaroon ng volcano, no? Ibig sabihin, this is a convergent boundary wherein oceanic and continental boundary are pushing each other, and when they do, the result may be a cratered mountain or a volcano. Nakikita nyo dyan sa map na may red lines. Ito naman, divergent boundary sa ocean. Yan. Ang tawag naman sa divergent boundary, other term for divergent boundary ay constructive. Although naghihiwalay sila, it's a constructive plate boundary because something is being created due to the process of sea floor spreading. Ayan. Ito naman ay convergent. Other term for convergent plate boundary is destructive. Why destructive? It's because part of the oceanic crust is being destroyed back into the mantle. Ayan, nagiging bumabalik sa mantle yung oceanic crust na de-destroy in a process called subduction. Also this, since siya ay convergent boundary, also a destructive plate boundary because wala ngang nagsasubduct gaano, pero nade-destruct niya yung crust. Pag sila ay umaangat, nasisira niya yung crust. Ayan. Ganun ulit, explore nyo na lang siya ulit. for plate movements, I'll just be showing you the direction of the motion. Nakita niyo na to kanina sa interactive. Ang pinakamabilis sa kanilang mag-move ay si Pacific, but the relative motion but the average motion of plates is just 5 centimeters per year. 5 centimeters per year lang ang galaw-galaw ng mga plates na yan. Ibig sabihin, pag tumambay tayo sa space, hindi natin manonotice yung movement na yan. Baka isipin nyo, nako, si Ms. De Vera sinungaling, wala namang gumagalaw. 3 hours na ako dito sa space, hindi ko pa nakita ang gumagalaw yung Eurasian plate or what. Okay. Because they are moving at a very slow speed, and that's an average of 5 centimeters per year. Paano nalalaman yung 5 centimeters per year na to? Sinong matyagang nagbabantay dyan? Sinong nagsusukat niyan every day, every year? So hindi naman yan kailangang tutukan ng mga geologists natin na bantayan na, nag-move na siya. Or what? Kasi meron tayong mga naka-install na GPS. You're familiar with GPS, no? GPS is now part of our system. Papadeliver tayo ng food, iyon natin yung location because our devices are GPS enabled. Ibig sabihin, our devices are sending signal to the GPS stations na nasa taas, satellites. Nakikipag-communicate yung phone natin sa mga GPS stations and also sa mga GPS na satellites through microwave technology. Kaya nalalaman ng phone nyo, nakaka-detect ng location yung phones natin. GPS yung technology doon. And also, that same technology has been used in studying how fast the plates has been moving for a year, no? Kasi wala naman talagang magtsatsagang magbantay niyan eh. Kahit sweldohan ako ng mahal para mag-record yan, hindi ako mag-record yan ng mano-mano. So there's this GPS. Okay. So nakita nyo kanina yung mga maps ng faults, no? Mga may fault lines and all. So today we'll also be studying about the faults since they are directly related to the earthquakes. And session 4 na to supposed to be sa face-to-face. Namiss ko na yung face-to-face. Ayan, so in here we'll have a review on what are the 3 types of plate boundaries. So, kakasabi lang nito kanina. So, ako na lang din sasagot sa tanong ko. We have the 3 types of plate boundaries are convergent, divergent, and transform. So, kung medyo gamay nyo na yung mga yon, you can add descriptions. Convergent boundaries are boundaries in which the adjacent plates are moving towards each other or converging. When divergent boundary naman, the plates are moving away from each other or diverging, and for a transform, the plates are sliding past each other. Sa fault naman, meron ding 3 types of faults. But before that, sagutin muna natin tong pa-4 picks 1 word ng problem set natin, ng PowerPoint natin. You can use the chat box para hindi kayo nagkakabanggaan ng sound waves. Ano kaya ito? Ayan, may sumagot na. Stress daw. Sure? Sure na yan? Ayan, so this is stress. Ano kayang ginagawa ng stress dito? I-stressin ba kami nito ni Ms. De Vera ngayong araw? Feeling ko. Ayan, stress. Next. May sagot na?
Reverse po.
Ayan, reverse. Kasi merong reverse card. So, reverse. Ano naman kaya ang kinalaman ng reverse na to sa mga fault na yan? Next. Ayan. Ayan na. Nandiyan na yung mga keyboard warriors natin. Broken. Very good. And, yes, ayan. Wala pang ibang sagot. Hanging. Very good. Lastly, ano yung charot to? May charot. Let's compress. Tama po. Very good. Thank you for participating. Now, paano kaya sila nare-relate sa isa't isa? Stress, reverse, broken, hanging, and compress. Okay. On our topic, faults, they are related to each other in such a way na pag diniscuss natin yung faults, magagamit natin silang lahat. Madadaanan yung mga terms na yan. Stress, reverse, broken, hanging, compress. Okay. So, by definition, fault is, ayan, lagay ko na lahat. Sorry. Lagay ko na lahat. Popost ko rin yan mamaya. Intindihin nyo na lang, i-digest nyo yung mga pinaka-importanting terms. Fault is a break in Earth's crust where slabs of crust slip past each other. So, hindi sila parehas ng plate boundaries plus ha, baka malito tayo. Although, faults occur along or near plate boundaries because they are, para silang mga shock absorber ng mga plate boundaries, no? Para silang shock absorber ng etong mga plate na to, naghihiwalay, pero yung effect nandito sa mga faults. Where the force of plate motion either compress, pull, or shear the crust so much that the crust breaks. Hindi naman to yung pagkaka-break ng crust na kagaya ng plate boundary na tuloy-tuloy, no? Sa plate boundary kasi, buo yun eh. Kinakat niya yung piece ng earth into a unit. Pero dito, sa fault, kung nakita nyo sa interactive kanina, mga lines lang. There are also 3 types of faults. Baka magkalituhan tayo, mga ate, mga kuya. There are 3 types of plate boundaries: convergent, divergent, transform. There are also 3 types of faults: normal, reverse, and strike slip. So, isa-isahin natin yung normal, reverse, and strike slip na yan. Paano nga ba natatawag na normal ang isang fault? May fault pala na normal, may fault pala na reverse, and may fault pala na strike slip. Yan. But before we talk about how or the characteristics of a normal reverse and strike slip fault, kailangan kilala muna natin yung mga terminologies na gagamitin natin, like the fault plane. Ayan, yung tinuturo ng red arrow is the fault plane. It's the plane which the rock or crustal material has fractured. Fracture lang, no? Kasi hindi pa naman naghiwalay ng tuluyan. Wala pang motion dyan na pang malakasang talaga. Naghihiwalay ng diretso or nag-move toward each other, causing it to appear like a plate boundary. So, fault plane, for example, ano ba pwede kong example dito sa basta titignan nyo lang tong line na to, makikita nyo yan sa examples mamaya. This is the fault plane. Kung pag ganito naman yung hati niya, fault plane pa rin naman ang tawag doon. Pero nababaliktad yung location ng footwall tsaka ng hanging wall. This type of fault here is a normal fault. Huwag nyo munang i-stress yung sarili nyo kung hala, bakit siya normal fault? titignan muna natin kung nasaan ang footwall at hanging wall sa different scenarios. Again, fault plane, yung mismong crack. Either pag ganito man siya or pag ganyan. Ayan. Hanging wall versus footwall. Ayan, dalawang pictures here. This is a fault plane, nabubulol ako. Fault plane to, gaya ng pagkaka-describe natin kanina. This is also a fault plane. Pero kung titignan nyo, magkaiba ng displacement na naganap, no? Parang itong isa, nag-slide si hanging wall pababa. Well, wala namang nagsaslide po taas. Nag-slide si hanging wall. And then dito naman, na-push si hanging wall, napilitan siyang napilitan siyang umangat. Okay. Pero kung titignan natin, parehas lang yung itsura ng footwall tsaka ng hanging wall. So kung bibigyan natin ng description si hanging wall, siya yung wall of a fault which is always above the fault plane. Ito yung fault plane. Sa taas niya si hanging wall. Pag ito yung fault plane, lahat ng nasa ibabaw nito, hanging wall. Lahat ng nasa ilalim niya, footwall. Para hindi tayo malito, foot sa baba. Nito. Tapos hanging sa taas niya. Ayan. Again, kung ito yung kung ito yung fault plane, si hanging wall yung nasa taas niya, nasa taas na part, and yung nasa ilalim ng fault plane, si footwall. May tanong po dito. Itong dalawang to ay magkaibang klase ng fault. This is a normal fault, this is a reverse fault. Pero kung titignan nyo, wala namang pinagkaiba. Parehas naman yung location, parehas naman yung footwall at hanging wall dito. Nagkaiba lang sila sa relative motion. Ito kasi, nag-slide nga si hanging wall, ibig sabihin, something is pulling hanging wall. Or even the footwall. Ito naman, since naangat ng konti si hanging wall, something is pushing against hanging wall. Napilitan siyang umakyat. Hindi kasi normal sa kanya yung aakyat siya. Diba? Parang sa normal. Mas madaling bumaba sa hagdan, diba? Kesa umakyat. Parang gano'n. So, doon tayo sa normal fault. Can you describe a normal fault using the arrows? So, when you talking about the relative motion of the normal fault, ang relative motion ng blocks dito ng footwall and hanging wall ay apart, away from each other. So, dahil away from each other ang relative motion, ang tendency, magsaslide si hanging wall. Pababa. Bakit ba ang kulit ko? Wala kang slide na pataas. So, magsaslide si hanging wall. Yun yung normal na mangyayari when the fault is experiencing pull, no? Hila. Nahihila. Kung titignan natin, footwall is here. Sorry. Footwall is nandito pa rin. Yan pa rin yung location niya. And hanging wall, itong part na to. Fault plane yan. So, lahat yung baton na nasa baba ni fault plane or yung block na nasa baba ni fault plane ay si footwall. Ito yung fault plane ulit. Yung block na nasa ibabaw niya ay si hanging wall. Example, this one, yung mga fault dito sa part na to are considered normal fault para silang dumadaos-dos. Nagsaslide nga. Kasi, something is pulling these blocks away from each other. Away from each other. Maghihiwalay na tong dalawang to. Kaya, nagkukos ng fault system dito sa part na to. As per, may GIF pala. Ayan, ganyan nangyayari. Nasaan ang hanging wall dito sa part na to? Ito, no? Yan yung hanging wall.
Nasa ka.
Itong part na to. Hindi ko alam. Left ba to? Right hand ako. Itong right, ito yung hanging wall. Makikita niyo yan kasi may mga linya dito. Para saan yung linyang yan? Ito yung mga linya na nakikita natin sa mga pato-pato, sa mga deposits dyan. Ibig sabihin, they are formed at different times. Ayan. Diyan natin ma-identify mamaya kung normal ba yung fault or reverse. Ayan. Key terms about normal force, normal faults. Ayan. Normal faults pala. Nasanay. Ayan. It's caused by tension where plates diverge. Kung maaalala nyo sa physics class nyo, tension. Pag sinabing tension, it's the force that tends to pull particles apart. And the fault is at an angle. And when the movement occurs along a normal fault, the hanging wall slips downward. Kagaya nito, nasaan po ang fault plane? Ayan, ititrace ko yung fault plane. Dalawa yan eh. Meron pa dito. So, paano ko nalaman na nag-move yung blocks? Ito ano to? Is this hanging wall or foot wall? Itong foot wall.
Football po.
Ayan, very good. Kasi, ito yung fault plane, tapos nasa baba ng fault plane yan. So, foot wall. So, makikita nyo dito na yung continuum ng lines na to, nakalimutan ko kung ano yung technical na tawag dito, medyo na-display siya downward. Ibig sabihin, itong fault na to ay normal fault because the hanging wall is slipped downward. Another example, ayan, ito yung fault plane, ito yung foot wall, tapos ito yung basehan natin, no? Tapos ayun yung karugtong niya sa baba. Ayan. Pag namumundok kayo, kung mahilig kayong mamundok, makakita kayo ng ganyan. Ano to? Pwede nyo i-classify as either normal fault or reverse fault. Yung reverse fault naman, by the term reverse, kabaliktaran, no? Ayan, ang movement or ang force na nagko-cause na para sa reverse fault ay yung tulak or compressive force, no? This one is experiencing compressive force. Ganun pa rin, fault plane, foot wall pa rin yung nasa baba ng fault plane, hindi nagbabago yun. But this time, the hanging wall, instead of being displaced downward, it's being displaced upward, which is not normal. No? Kasi mabigat yan eh. So, if the gravity is ruling, pababasa na siya. Okay. Kaso, it's a reverse fault. So, natutulak sila towards each other, so walang magagawa si hanging wall kundi umangat. Ayan, this one, ganyan. Kayo ba naman itulak niyan sa ganyang direction? And reverse foot wall pa rin to and hanging wall pa rin yan. Examples or important details about this. Compression, yung dahilan, ibig sabihin compressive force associated with convergent plate boundaries, but not the same as convergent plate boundaries. They are not plate boundaries. Okay. The hanging wall is displaced upward relative to the foot wall, and I have here real-life examples. Nasaan ang ano nito, ang foot wall? Left or right?
Sa right po.
Right side.
Right po.
Ayan, very good. Kasi papunta dito yung fault, no? So, yung nasa baba niya, ito. Yung part na yan. Tapos, ito naman yung hanging wall. Kung makikita nyo, umangat. Kasi ayun, no, yung continuum ng kulay ng bato. Naangat siya konti. Meron pa dito. Ayan. Ang layo. Papunta doon. So, nasaan ang, ano nito, ang foot wall?
Sa kaliwa po.
Ano kaliwa? Ito? Left, tama. Ayan. Ito, yung foot wall. Tapos, naangat ng konti. Ay, hindi pala yun konti. Kung relative. Ayan. Naangat yung bandang, yung hanging wall. Reverse din ito. Ayan yung continuum niya. Ayan. May mga example. Mamaya i-analyze nyo na. Tingnan nyo na lang yung mga pictures. Also, the third one is a is a strike slip fault. Para siyang transform plate boundary associated with din siya with transform plate boundary. May dalawang classification. If it's dominant to the right, it's dextral. If it's dominant to the left, it's sinistral. Nandito lahat sa lecture. And ganyan lang itsura niya. Pag mas malaki yung movement sa left, it's sinistral. Kapag mas malaking movement sa right, it's a dextral. Some example includes here, ayan, yung hindi naka-align kasi nag-move siya. Also this one, I think this was taken somewhere in California. This one. And the most important here, or one of the most common example is the West Valley Fault System. The West Valley Fault System is a dextral strike slip. And dumadaan siya sa Pasig. Ayan. Ito, nandito yung Pasig. Hanggang sa Laguna. Simula ata siya sa Tarlac. Okay. So, in identifying this, saglit na lang. So, this one is this normal, reverse, or strike. So, we have here. This is a reverse fault. This one. This
Strike.
is a strike slip because it's a bird's eye view. This one. This is a normal fault. May naganap na slide. And this one. Yes, it's another normal fault. So, pag-aralan nyo tong i-identify ng mas maigi, no? Kasi parang may ganito ata susunod na quiz nyo sa 36.2. Questions, clarifications, iwanan ko kayo sa question. Ako pala yung may question. What are the consequences of Earth's lithosphere having been divided into tectonic plates? Mag-reflect kayo on this particular question. I know you still have another class. I'm sorry for the 1 minute 2 minutes na overtime. I'll be posting the PowerPoint presentation to your Google Classroom. If you don't have questions anymore, you are now free to leave the class. If you have questions, please use the chat box or the group chat. Thank you so much for participating for today, lalong-lalo na yung mga sinamahan ako sa screen. I have here, nakikita ko sila all throughout. Thank you, and tomorrow you'll have a quiz. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you, Miss.
Thank you.